Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Sheila stood at the kitchen sink, her hands drenched in soapy water, cleaning the same dinner plate for the third time without recognizing it. The evening light slanted through the lace curtains, turning the room golden and gentle, as it always did just before dusk fell on the small house on Maple Street. The radio was set to a low volume, and an old Billie Holiday song made her feel both reassured and little sad, as memories frequently do at the age of 78. She was thinking about nothing in particular, whether she had enough eggs for tomorrow's breakfast, whether the hydrangeas needed to be watered, when the doorbell rang. She cleaned her hands on the old apron, which still smelled faintly of vanilla from the cookies she had prepared that morning, and walked to the front door with a slow, deliberate steps of someone whose knees no longer hurried for anyone. Through the frosted glass, she could see a tall and thin person standing on the porch, shoulders slumped against the December chill. She opened the door and saw Dylan, her grandson, dressed in a dark coat that appeared excessively thin for the weather. His dark hair draped across his forehead in the same way it had since he was a child, but his face was different, paler, sharper, as if the bones beneath the skin had rearranged themselves overnight. "Dylan," she murmured pleasantly before stepping aside.
"Come on in.
"You'll die standing out there." He stepped inside without saying anything, pushing past her with a weird hesitation. He didn't remove his coat. He didn't kick off his boots as he normally did, leaving muddy prints that she'd pretend to chastise him about later. Instead, he stood in the middle of the living room, hands buried in his pockets, staring around as if he'd never been there before. The familiar clutter, the Afghans wrapped over the back of the couch, the framed portraits covering the fireplace, and the ancient cuckoo clock that hadn't operated in 15 years, seemed to disturb him. Sheila closed the door against the cold and turned to face him, smiling as grandparents do when they're trying not to worry. "Sit down, sweetheart. I will make tea. You look half frozen." He did not sit. He only looked at her, his eyes big and dark, something trembling behind them that she couldn't identify. "Grandma," he spoke quietly. The word came out softer than usual, higher, like a voice she recognized but couldn't place. Sheila hesitated halfway to the kitchen. "What is it, Dylan? You're scaring me a little." He exhaled deeply, shaking his entire body. Then, in the same quiet, strange tone, he whispered, "Grandma, I'm Luna." The words hung in the air between them like a delicate glass ornament dropped in slow motion. Sheila felt them strike somewhere deep inside her chest, a spot she hadn't realized was still painful. For a brief period, she was immobile. She could not breathe. She merely gazed at the boy, no, the person, standing in her living room, coat still on, eyes imploring for something she couldn't quite grasp. Luna. The name lingered in her head like a ghost from a long-forgotten dream. Dylan had whispered the name Luna to her 3 years ago, late one summer night, when the two of them sat on the back porch eating ice cream straight from the carton. He was 15 years old at the time, all elbows and clumsiness, with a cracked voice between boy and man. He had peered at the stars for quite some time before whispering, almost too gently to be heard, "Grandma, if I told you something important, would you still love me?" She responded without hesitation. "Always. No matter what." He then told her that he did not feel like a boy inside. Dylan's name felt like an ill-fitting cloak that he'd been compelled to wear all his life. That when he slept, he imagined himself as someone else, someone gentler, brighter, and named Luna. Sheila recalls every detail of that night. The crickets sing in the grass. The moon hung low and full, its color pure milk. Her heart had cracked open, not from fear or rejection, but from a deep, searing love that startled her. She had held him while he grieved, silent tears seeping into her cotton blouse, and muttered repeatedly, "I love you. I love you. Whoever you are, I love you." But the next morning, he pretended nothing had happened. He'd walked down to breakfast in his old jeans and t-shirt, his hair cut short after letting it grow a little over the summer, and he'd grinned at her over cereal, saying, "You make the best pancakes, Grandma." There was no word of Luna. There is no reference of the night before. And Sheila, unsure of what to do, had followed his example. She'd waited. She'd loved him silently and deeply from the sidelines, hoping that one day he'd feel safe enough to return to that reality. 3 years have passed. He had gone to college 2 states away. They spoke on the phone every Sunday. He sent her postcards featuring photographs of college libraries and coffee shops. Dylan came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, always courteous and affectionate. The name Luna had not been mentioned again by either of them. Sheila began to wonder if she'd dreamed it, if it had been a fleeting moment of adolescent turmoil that had vanished like a storm cloud. Until now. "Grandma, I'm Luna," he repeated again, and this time his voice trembled, and tears welled up in his eyes, which Sheila noticed were lined with the smallest trace of mascara, smeared from sobbing. Sheila felt the floor wobble under her. The entire room became devoid of air. She stretched out blindly for the arm of the couch, lowering herself upon it, as if her bones had turned to water. "Luna." Her grandson was in front of her, shivering and saying the name that had been silently whispered in Sheila's heart for 3 years, like a hidden plea. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her mouth opened and closed. She felt the jolt run through her, cold, then hot, and then cold again. Not shocked by the truth itself. She knew, deep down, that the truth was still there, waiting. No. The shock came from the fortitude required to come here, to stand in her living room on a December evening and say it aloud after all this time. Luna took a tentative step forwards. "I'm sorry," she muttered. I understand it's a lot. I didn't intend to. I didn't know how else to." Her voice trailed off, and she clamped a hand to her mouth, shoulders curling inward. Sheila discovered her voice at last. It came out little and trembling. "Come here." Luna paused, then took 3 rapid steps across the room and dropped to her knees in front of the couch, just like she had when she was 5 years old and injured her knee on the driveway. Sheila stretched out and cradled that cherished face in both hands, her thumbs brushing away the tears that were falling quickly now. "Look at me," Sheila asked quietly. Luna looked up. Her eyes, which Sheila had watched develop from baby blue to stormy green gold over the course of 18 years, were wide with fear. Sheila observed her. Really looked. The delicately formed arch of the brows. Sheila's hair, which had grown longer than she expected, fell in lovely waves around her face. A thin sheen over trembling lips. The dainty silver hoop earrings caught the lamplight. All of the minor nuances that had been hidden or minimized during previous trips were now presented as fragile gifts. Sheila said, "You're beautiful," and she meant it truly. Luna let out a half-sob, half-laugh, and suddenly she was in Sheila's arms, coat and all, face buried against her grandmother's shoulder, as she hadn't been since childhood. Sheila clutched her closely, one hand stroking her silky hair and the other wrapping around her back, feeling the shaking that came from deep within. "I was so scared," Luna murmured into her sweatshirt. "I feared you might have forgotten. Perhaps you didn't truly mean it. Or perhaps..." "Shoo," Sheila soothed. "I intended it. I've always meant it. They remain like that for a long time." The cuckoo clock ticked its meaningless ticks. Outside, the wind rocked the maple trees' barren branches. Inside, grandmother and granddaughter clung to each other as the shock faded, replaced by something warmer and deeper. Luna finally pushed back, wiping her face with the sleeve of her coat. "I've been at school. I've started going by the name Luna. For about 2 years now. Everyone there knows me as Luna. My friends, professors, and roommate. I changed my name wherever I could. But returning home..." She swallowed hard. Coming home was difficult. I wasn't sure how to tell Mom and Dad again. I tried once last year, but it did not go well. They claimed I was puzzled, that it was a phase, that I should wait. Sheila's heart wrenched at the agony in those words. She knew her son and daughter-in-law loved Dylan, Luna, in their own way, but they were practical people from another era, and fear had made them clumsy. "So you waited," Sheila replied. Luna nodded. "I waited until I was unable to continue, until pretending every time I returned home felt like lying with each breath. Then I thought, perhaps I could start with you. Because you listened that night. You did not say I was wrong or broken. You have just. Sheila felt tears well up in her own eyes. Luna looked down at her hands and said, I'm so glad you came to me. I practiced what I would say throughout the bus ride here. I had the entire speech. And then I came here, and I blurted it out like an idiot. Sheila laughed through her tears. It was perfect. Luna grinned, a faint nervous smile that lit up her entire face. Sheila noticed it clearly for the first time. The girl her grandchild had always been inside was finally shining through the surface. Let me look at you properly, Sheila replied as she sat back. Luna carefully stood up and removed her coat, revealing a silky purple sweater and dark pants that fit differently than Dylan's had ever done. She made a self-conscious turn before returning her gaze to Sheila. Sheila's breath caught. Oh, my darling. You're lovely. Luna's cheeks flushed the same way they had when Sheila complimented Dylan's schoolwork or soccer goals. Thank God, some things remained unchanged. They then moved into the kitchen. Sheila prepared tea, chamomile for relaxation, and they sat at the old oak table where decades of family memories had been shared. Luna spoke, words pouring over each other now that the dam had cracked. She described her first experience wearing a skirt to class, which was both terrifying and exhilarating. She mentioned a buddy who had helped her choose her first genuine cosmetics. She talked about the gender clinic, the therapist, and the low-dose hormones that softened her complexion and shaped her face enough to make looking in the mirror pleasant. She talked about the name Luna, how it came to her in a dream the summer she was 15, the same summer she sat on Sheila's porch and confessed her truth for the first time. Sheila listened. She posed nice queries. She admired the strength it had required to tread this route, especially when many closest to her had advised her to wait, pause, and reconsider. She reflected on her own life, the expectations imposed on her as a young woman in the 1960s, the goals she'd laid aside to marry and have children, and the silent regrets she kept like smooth stones in her pocket. She had no words for what Luna was going through, but she knew deep down what it meant to exist in a body or a life that didn't quite fit. Night fell outside the windows. The tea became cold and was replaced by hot chocolate with marshmallows, as Sheila used to prepare it when Dylan was younger. Luna giggled at the memory of scorching her tongue with the first drink every time. Luna leaned across the table and grasped Sheila's hand. I'd like to tell Mom and Dad.
Soon. But I needed to know.
I needed one family member who saw me. Sheila gripped her hand. You got that person. You always will. They spoke until the clock struck 11, when Luna's eyes began to droop. Sheila prepared the guest room like she always did, with new lavender-scented linens and an extra quilt because Luna had always felt cold. But this time, as she tucked the corners, she paused and grinned, knowing that the room would now greet Luna, not Dylan. Luna hugged herself as she stood in the guest room doorway before going to bed. Grandma? Yes, sweetheart. Thanks for not being shocked. Or maybe you were surprised, but you didn't make me feel uncomfortable. Sheila approached and kissed her forehead like she had done 1,000 times before. You would never be a stranger to me. You are my grandchild. My Luna. Luna's eyes welled up again, but this time the sobs were muted. She hugged Sheila tightly before disappearing into the room. Sheila entered her own bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at nothing. The astonishment had given way to something else, deep thankfulness coupled with sorrow for Luna's years of carrying this alone, and a fierce commitment to stand with her now. She considered the phone call she would make tomorrow to her son, Luna's father. She mentally rehearsed the words, "She's still the same child you've always loved. She is braver than any of us. Listen to her." But tonight there was serenity in the house. The old walls appeared to breathe better, as if they, too, had waited for this truth to be stated aloud. Sheila turned off the light and lay down, listening to Luna's subtle movements in the guest room, drawers opening, the soft thud of boots being removed, the groan of bed springs.
Ordinary sounds.
Beloved sounds. And somewhere in the darkness, Sheila spoke into the hush. Welcome home, Luna. The words seemed like a blessing, absolution, and the completion of a circle that had began 3 years ago under a summer moon. She fell asleep with tears on her cheeks and a heart more full than it had been in years. In the morning, there would be more tears, more conversations, and more bridges to cross. But, for the time being, grandmother and granddaughter slept under the same roof, breathed the same air, and were united by a love that had waited patiently and was now fully awake. Sheila had always assumed that as people aged, their memories were sharper rather than duller. She could still remember the smell of her mother's cooking on cold winter mornings, the precise creak of the third step in her childhood house, and how her late husband used to clear his throat before saying something important. So, as Dylan stood in front of her, hands quivering and eyes sparkling with what appeared to be dread and hope entwined, she followed her senses when they told her something was very wrong. "Grandma," Dylan whispered again, his voice shaking, "I'm Luna." The words came gently, almost respectfully, but the implication struck Sheila like a strike to the chest. Her heart skipped and raced, as if attempting to leave her ribs. She gazed at him, truly stared, looking for evidence of a joke, a mistake, anything that might help her understand what he had just said. Dylan was her grandson, tall and awkward, but familiar in the way that only family can be. Luna was gone. "Don't say that," Sheila said softly, her voice low and brittle. "That's not funny." "I know," Dylan said hastily. "I understand it sounds insane. But please just listen to me." Sheila's hands tightened on the armrests of her chair. The living room suddenly felt too small, and the air was too heavy. The framed images on the wall, birthdays, graduations, and holidays, seemed to be watching her, silent witnesses to an event she had never believed would occur. One image in particular piqued her interest. Luna at 17, laughing, her dark hair in mid-swing, eyes bright with a future Sheila had predicted would be long and full. "You're cruel," Sheila murmured, though there was no true fury in her voice, only suffering. "You look like her brother, you sound like him, and you're coming here and saying that?" Dylan swallowed hard. "I do not expect you to believe me right now. I would not if I were you. But I'm Luna. Or I was. Before." The room was silent, save for the ticking of the clock on the mantel. Sheila had purchased the clock with her husband for their 40th anniversary. He used to say it kept time as they did, steady, dependable, and impossible to ignore. Every click felt like a hammer hitting her nerves. "Explain," she asked last. "And don't lie to me." Dylan nodded, bringing a chair closer but not yet sitting down, as if wondering whether he was allowed. "You remember how Luna was always writing?" Sheila nodded slowly. "There are journals, notebooks, and scraps of paper everywhere." She said it helped her think. "I still have them," he replied. "Or I know where they are. In the blue box under your bed, the one with the broken latch." Sheila's breath caught. That box was somewhat unknown. She rarely opened it because the memories inside were too vivid. "Go on," she muttered. "There's a poem in the red notebook," Dylan said, his voice calmer now, as if he was grounding himself in reality. "The one about the lake, and the promise she made to herself on her birthday. She never showed it to anybody. Not even me. But I know every line." Sheila felt tears prick at her eyes, unwanted and unstoppable. The lake. The promise. She remembered Luna returning home that day, drenched and cheerful, reluctant to reveal where she had been. That poetry was a secret between Luna and the paper. "Anyone could have read it," Sheila replied softly. "No," Dylan replied kindly, "because she burned the final page. She said it felt too private to exist." Sheila shut her eyes. Her chest ached. Dylan was seated now, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, looking at her in the same way Luna used to when she was frightened she wouldn't be believed.